So I was asking the vice chair too, if, since, you were on the interim committee, I'm going to go through like where we're at, amendments, what the bills do now, but also throw it to you in terms of like intent when folks are asking certain questions, if you're okay with that.
That's fine, yeah. I think, did she say that she was going to walk through the bill after you testified?
I think so.
Okay. Are you going to stay for the whole thing?
I'm going to stay as long as I can.
Okay.
And you mentioned next order, so I guess I'm presenting the bill and then you have it.
I think that's the way it goes. That's why I'm not sure if I'm going to. So I'm happy to answer questions.
I got you.
Do you want me to sit with you or sit there?
You sit there for now, and then if it looks like we may as well. If we're
I don't know. You did a great job on the
Oh, did you watch it?
You got this.
Did they tell you did anybody fill you in on the third time I got up? Somebody texted me saying like you could work pages and marks because the joke is that he was like a page.
Oh,
So I was like,
that's funny.
For going through the page.
Okay, let's go. We're ready to go. We are on? Okay, we are here to hear two bills from the House on cybersecurity. We have Delegate Young. We have 1202 and we have 1346. Do you care in what order we go, Delegate Young?
Not exactly. I mean, 1346 and 1202 makes sense in terms of the order, but it's
Okay.
I can do it.
Yeah, let's do 1346.
Sure.
Let's start from the general to the more specific, or from more global.
Sure. And I know that you all will be going into a work group after I testify, so if I start going into too much, feel free to just let me know, go back to
No, we
general.
appreciate that very much. Thank
So,
you.
for the record, Delegate Pat Young, District 44B, happy to present HB 1346 to the EHE Committee in the Senate. So these, and I will, the best way to go through it is that on the House side, this was put together with extensive work from the HGO Committee, members of the Joint Committee, as well as the Speaker's Office, and members that took part in the interim ad hoc work group. We started out, and this is just background, the original bills were extensive. There were, I think, and my counterpart from the Joint Committee could correct me if I'm wrong, close to 50 recommendations that came from the ad hoc work group. The original bills, as they were drafted, that were made public, had about 34, 36 of the recommendations in it. The pared-down version has about 24 of the recommendations from the ad hoc committee covered. I won't necessarily go into what those recommendations are, but in terms of what the bill does, it covers 24 of those recommendations. So 1346, general summary, codifies the Cybersecurity Coordination Council and the Office of Security Management in DO-IT. And this was under the executive order, establishes the State Chief Information Security Officer, Ciso, as head of the office, establishes responsibilities of the office, coordination of overall cybersecurity strategies for units of state government, and supports cybersecurity preparation of local governments in coordination with MDEM. Requires the council to provide advice and recommendations to the CISO on cybersecurity strategy, prioritizing risk, and make recommendations for the budget, study partnerships, and promotes cybersecurity education. Creates the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Unit in DO-IT to assist political subdivisions. Centralizes IT policy for the executive branch under DO-IT, but allows state agencies to maintain their own IT units. Authorizes DO-IT to coordinate local cybersecurity procurement. It's paid by, for, and by the state. Requires DO-IT to develop and maintain a statewide cybersecurity master plan. Requires DO-IT to consult with the Coordinating Council on cybersecurity strategy. Establishes a mandatory appropriation from the governor for implementing the statewide cybersecurity master plan, and requires a report from the governor on IT budget information, and establishes requirements for state and local cybersecurity preparedness assessments and reports, as well as requirements and procedures to report cybersecurity incidents. We had two amendments coming from the House. First one was technical, added co-sponsors. from the committee, amendment number 2. Excuse me, I apologize, I just need to take a... Thank you. Amendment number 2 moves the Cybersecurity Coordination Operations Office from MDEM to DOIT and renames it the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Unit. This was because there was already a name. They didn't want to confuse the office, so they changed the name. Specifies qualifications for the Ciso. Specifies that the Office of Security Management is not responsible for the information technology installation and maintenance operations normally conducted by state units and local governments. Alters the membership of the Cybersecurity Coordinating Council. Removes language that would have exempted meetings of the council from the Open Meetings Act. Exempts IT procurements by SBE, OAG, the treasurer, the comptroller, legislature, and judiciary from DOIT control. This was to ensure separation of powers and other agencies that we believed should be separate and independent. Specifies that state agencies may maintain their own IT units and removes language that would have centralized IT procurement for all units of state government under DOIT. That is the general run-through of the bill. Obviously, it's extensive. One way of looking at this bill, 1346, is the move towards centralization. I believe that we've created here is a framework that can be, one, making sure in the next year and the out years from here that we're in a better posture in terms of cybersecurity than we are today, and creates a framework that can be built off of in other administrations and other legislatures. With that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, committee, I'm going to start off with a couple. Let's try, if we can, to look at 15, 20, 30,000 feet. Let's not get in the weeds too much at this point. I think that would sort of be a distraction. Delegate Young, I guess my first question is, a lot of us want to know the role. We have all these agencies, state agencies. We have DOIT, we have MEMA. One of the questions that keeps coming up is what authority is the cyber unit either augmenting or taking away from the agencies? You mentioned a moment ago, for example, they will have procurement over cyber, but I assume by implication, not all technology.
That's
So
correct.
Give us just the structural question of
Sure.
the oversight, what authority they're going to have, what's going to remain with the agency. So I think that's, restructuring is a key question. So
Sure. And to your point, I believe that in our intent has been to augment, not to, excuse me,
I've been fighting it for 8 days.
augment what's currently being done. And while it expands the role of DOIT and expands and clarifies what role they can play, IT within agencies, within departments, generally will be able to remain the same, but it also allows for and makes sure that, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Clarifies the role and and expands the role for DOIT within executive agencies. So where I would say that as of now, more of a you have an ability to recommend, to talk, to sort of have an open dialogue. This adds a little bit more teeth to DOIT's ability to more than just a recommendation, but also requiring having a little bit more teeth to their recommendations. And if through assessment identify weaknesses that need to be identified, it would no longer necessarily be an option to ignore or to not follow through with those changes of recommendations, that they would have to go follow through with it.
Right. Again, not to get into the weeds, but I think what full authority are they now asserting and taking opposed to advisory? I mentioned one.
Oh, sure.
I don't know who's got procurement now on cyber stuff, but in your comments, you said they have full authority for procurement over cyber things. Are there any other additional things that are explicitly shifting to do it?
I wouldn't, and I'm prefacing this with that right now, DOIT has the responsibility of the state's cyber security plan in terms of a master plan on what things are supposed to look like.
Right.
So I was going to point out that while it's not giving that to them since they already have it, procurement is something that's being given in the bill, but where if there is something that needs to be changed or there is a threat that's been identified through an assessment, and I might have already mentioned this earlier, they can require, and in terms of authority, they can require that be fixed. My understanding from previously, before this bill and right now, DO-IT can take an agency off of the network, but they can't require an agency to address a weakness related to their cybersecurity posture. Does that make sense?
And this bill changes that how? So in other words, if they require them to come offline, can they direct them to do the changes, or they can suggest them?
Yes, yes.
Which?
They can require them to do the changes and make suggestions with, yes. Yep.
A couple of others. Is the Cyber Preparedness Unit and the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Office the same, or are they duplicative?
No, and we actually, there was concerns about duplicativeness, but they're not the same, but they fall under the same office, excuse me, and under DO-IT and under the Ciso. And so they're not duplicative, and we've worded it and changed the language from the first bill to address the concerns where there was duplicativeness in well, this is 1202 and 1346. 1205, which is in another committee where they all tie together, deals specifically with procurement and oversight, where we removed an establishment of an office through one of the other bills because it was duplicative. But these two new offices and departments are not duplicative of each other.
One or two more quick ones, then I'm going to call on Senator Carosa, although she just turned off her light. Okay. You mentioned, or someone mentioned, the MACO amendments. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us what they do, actually?
And there have been many amendments. In talking with MACO, there was the concern about requirements of locals, as well as in the original version, it was giving authority, or trying to give authority for state government to then require local government to do certain things that they did not want to do, which is not surprising through MACO, and we understood that. And in the first draft that came out of this, recognizing that while we want to move towards centralization, we want to move in a way that's right for Maryland, in a way that makes sense for us. So I'm trying to think of exactly which amendments that they were requesting that we put into the bill, but their concerns were specifically about the requirements for locals, which we ended up taking out.
I think my last one. Over the last couple of years, there are some units like USM, for example, that feel they have a sophisticated security system and they don't want to change it or fall under another unit like DO-IT. Are they in or are they out?
We've taken USM out.
Okay. Is there anybody else out?
Yeah. Yes. And Board of Elections, Treasurer's Office, the Comptroller, excuse me, the Legislature, the Judiciary, Office of the Attorney General are all exempt from well, at least the IT procurement, but we've also removed them from that provision under DO-IT.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're focusing on the state bill, though there's obviously overlap for now. I'm going to go to Senator Carosa, followed by the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your questions, because I am trying to kind of hone in a little bit. And this might be for the delegate, but...
Madam Senator, let me just reiterate to people watching in the committee, we are not voting today on this. This is a fact-finding and for us to get a better understanding, please.
Thank you, and I need that better understanding because I know some of my colleagues have spent delegate a lot of time on this and the senator, so I'm really going back up to that 30,000-foot level to understand. And Delegate Young, thank you for all of your work on this. And my question might be to you, but I might ask for additional background from the Department of General Services, because I'm going back, trying to kind of reconstruct, focusing on the procurement issue. And I wanted to better understand what happened 5 years ago with moving, when we had the Office of State Procurement with DGS, and what we're doing in this bill, and wanted to try to see where we were with the reforms that we were working on from before. So would it be possible, Mr. Chair, for background purposes for both the delegate and DGS to give a little bit of that, Department of General Services to give a little bit of that background, just to bring us up to speed on procurement?
Huh? Yeah, well, we're not having, no, this is the bill, but we were not, it was a member only, because we heard it. But we did, Mr. Mulford from Do It is here, who's been involved with this, and we want to have him as a resource. If DGS, is DGS here? Who's here from DGS?
Two people, Mike Haefley and.
I was trying to understand the DGS part of procurement, maybe before we move into the procurement impacts on us with this bill. That's what I was trying to do.
And, well, I can at least attempt to answer what your question in terms of background. So one of the recommendations that came from the ad hoc committee was about, and looking at what other states do, procurement was a barrier to moving judiciously in an appropriate timeline related to cybersecurity threats. So there was seen as a not having primary procurement authority has been seen in other states as a barrier to meeting goals that they've had. So one of the recommendations was to grant procurement authority or primary procurement authority back to the Department of IT to do it. So that came from the ad hoc committee, which we moved forward on. I will point out, and again, apologize to the committee, where this is 1346 and references the role in procurement. The actual language related to procurement and oversight is in 1205, which is not in this committee. So that's the background in terms of why we want
So
that
I
direction.
think I was trying to go back even further on when we did the procurement reform 5 years ago. I was trying to understand what we were doing there. And then I understand when you're saying the recommendation now is to put procurement back into Department of Information Technology.
For
And-
cyber procurement, software and hardware, not all
Right.
procurement.
Not all three, yes.
Right, so I'm not sure that was the issue 5 years ago. If Do It has anything to add in terms of context,
Do you want to, can you give some
well,
background?
yeah, they can come up briefly, but this is not a hearing. You've signed up in opposition, and you have written testimony, I get that. I don't want to get into a debate, but if you can very briefly talk about what was covered on the procurement reform 5 years ago, and briefly the changes, but I don't want to make this subjective, this is factual.
Mr. Chair, I'm really just trying to understand the background and I understand we're focused on cybersecurity procurement.
Because if we open up that question, I know the senator from Howard County would probably have a lot of questions, because a lot of us are unhappy with what's been happening with the procurement for a number of years. We don't want to put these people on the hot seat now. We've been doing that for the last 18 months. So I restrict your comments to vis-a-vis cybersecurity and the role of Do It in terms of procurement. And please introduce yourselves, and you can proceed in whatever, either one of you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Zimmerman. Is that better? Sorry. My name is Mike Zimmerman. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for the Office of State Procurement. And 1205 is correct. That's the bill that's of the greatest concern for us, because that actually makes Do It a primary procurement agency. And in there lies the biggest concern.
Right.
There's a third bill
Yes.
that I believe is with budget and tax,
That is correct, yeah.
who now has procurement, and some of the more direct issues are coming there. So these bills are affected policy-wise tangentially. So it's like with any other bill, they cross over committees. But we're not here to debate 1205.
I understand, but
Okay.
it links directly to this bill in that if they're a primary procurement agency, they can actually buy all IT, anything IT. So not just cybersecurity equipment, which is what the intent of this bill is supposed to be. Well, I would argue that there is efficiencies built into the process over the last 5 years due to the modernization initiative. DO-IT and DGS have worked very well together over the last year to create an intake process that is very efficient and effective. And both agencies, I believe, would say that they're very happy with the current process.
I guess the question, I'm going to supersede the senator. Do either of these bills explicitly change that arrangement when it comes to things other than cyber?
So, yes, sir, it would if DO-IT becomes a procurement agency. Then the whole portion of what DGS does gets moved over to procurement. Now, if they're not a primary procurement agency, we would still have oversight, and that would be fine.
But again, let me be clear. These two bills, are there policy decisions and language in these two bills that would do that, or is that solely in 1205?
Good afternoon, Mike Hafley, Deputy Chief Procurement Officer for the state. These bills do not, 1202, 1346, do not impose that primary responsibility on DO-IT. However, it does assign certain procurement responsibilities as it relates to cyber. I'm not sure what the barrier is for procurement. Whether the procurement's done at DGS or at DO-IT, we all have to follow the same statute, regulations, and policy. So I'm not sure what the barrier is.
So, can I just try a clarifying question? Because I'm a little bit more confused now. Right now, as I understand 1346, which is before us, that the cybersecurity procurement is being moved from DGS to the Department of Information Technology. Do I have that right?
That's our
And that's in
understanding.
1346?
Yes.
Okay. So 5 years ago or so, we had this whole procurement reform and tried to set some reforms in place. So I was trying to understand how this shifting it, I guess, back to DO-IT is impacting DGS. Are you concerned that we need a coordination issue between the two departments? I mean, I'm really trying to understand.
Well, I don't want to get into their policy opinion on this. They signed up against this, so their policy is to hold on to that authority. And I'm not sure how much time I want to spend on not litigating, but debating this among the people who might benefit, might lose, might think it's in their best interest or not. So I'm a little concerned about going down that rabbit hole. I mean, if you're here, we'll give you a 25-word or 50-word answer to that question, but the bill before us moves cybersecurity. So I will give you moderate leeway of about a minute and a half to answer her question, but we're not going to get into a debate with other witnesses.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, it tears down everything that the efficiencies that have been built over the last 5 years, and it puts the procurement back into DO-IT. So now you have two agencies doing what one agency should be doing. DO-IT is obviously the SME on IT, and we're the SMEs on procurement. Yes, thank you, I'm sorry. And we believe that putting it back there then bifurcates the entire process, and we go back to undoing what the modernization initiative actually created.
I'm on a similar line as Senator Carrozza. Actually, I was going to ask Mr. Hafley about, in particular, about the work, but that you guys have been doing the last 4 or 5 years. My worry is that. Do you?
I'm
Yeah, but
concerned because
Yeah. Okay.
I know the next comment's going to come from the chair, from the doctor, and I'm going to be right behind him about what's happened the last 5 years, and I think it's been a goddamn disaster. So we can go down that rabbit hole if we want. But the House has said, when it comes to cyber, they want to take it out of DGS and give it to Do It. That is a policy decision. It's a policy decision up to us. So there's more to the bill than that. It's an appropriate and relevant issue. But I don't want to just get stuck on that. And, you know, when we have the bill before us, we can debate amendments to put it back in and change it. But right now, we want to understand as much of the bill as we can. So back to you, Vice Chair. Okay. Senator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Young, so you talked about, a question was asked, I think, by the chairman, which agencies are taken out of the bill as far as moving the cyber to Do It. So you mentioned like the University of Maryland system, right? Mm-hmm. So why were they taken out?
So, one, I'll get to USM, but also some of the other agencies that we took out were a matter of, you know, a balance of powers, or separation of powers. So judiciary was separated. We felt that an executive agency having some pseudo-authority over the legislative branch or the judiciary branch and some of these other agencies that were already independent crossed that line, so we took them out. USM was also brought out after multiple conversations related to their operations and their interjurisdictional partnerships that they had. And since I've used USM as an example in terms of what we're trying to create here, Do It being for not a perfect example, but the USM of cybersecurity for executive branch agencies, and USM having their IT departments, having their individual campuses, already working and doing some of this work, working with the subcommittee, working with the full committee. It was determined that they made a rational argument to separate them out.
Okay. So the University of Maryland, they are doing what they're on the track to be more compliant than that. That's why they're a good place. And so what are some other agencies? I know you understand the judiciary and
Legislature.
Yeah. What other, are there other departments or
State Board of Ed.
State Board of Ed.
There were, after the first bill dropped, my office's line blew up with 10, 15 agencies wanting to be taken out, which, after discussions with them and letting them know and clarifying that their interpretation of the first draft was not the intent, and we fixed that through amendments.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. This is after the first draft?
The first draft of the bill before the amendments, that their reading was that it was taking IT personnel, IT agents, everything from them, which wasn't the intent. So we amended it and took out provisions that most of them had concerns with, which was at the end of the bill.
Yeah.
Section, I believe, 4 and 5, which were separated out.
Senator Ellis, the list is on page 19 and 20.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. So, Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, are they in or are they out?
No, they're in.
They're in?
Yes. We amended, but after conversations with them too, we had also amended it so that the concerns that they had, one of their major concerns, and this went across other agencies, was their partnerships with the federal government and federal agencies. They were concerned, and which is no longer a concern because of the way that we've amended it. They were afraid that they wouldn't have been qualified to participate with the FBI and the National Registry of being able to check fingerprints, which was not the intent at all. And we made sure that they were aware of that, and then we amended it to make sure that that was addressed. So there was other concerns related to the port as well as the airport. We made sure that the amendments also covered those concerns so that it was very clear what they had control over, what they didn't.
Okay, so thanks. So dealing with like the Department of Public Safety, Correctional Services, so what kind of amendments were put in to satisfy their concerns as far as being able to handle those federal public safety, law enforcement issues
major one was taking out at the very end of the bill, section 4 and 5, I believe.
If you have a copy of the reprint, just direct us to what page, Pat.
Nope, got it, excuse me. Yep, on the very last page, page 36, we ended up taking out section 5, 6, and 7, which addressed their concerns.
So, okay, let me see. So page 36 of the reprint.
Of the reprint, yes.
Which section, say that again for me, please?
Section 5, 6, and 7, which are crossed out.
5, 6, and
Am I looking at the,
We've got a reprint, third reader copy. That's not, the last page of the bill in the reprint is 41. Oh, okay,
oh, do we,
sorry.
am I on the wrong, I'm sorry if I'm on the wrong page.
Senator Ellis,
Okay.
the
yeah.
very last page of the
Thank you.
bill, 41, 5, 6, and 7 are the ones the delegate was referring to.
Yes, sir.
40.
Thank you.
So, okay, so page 41, all three sections. Okay,
The language there was the most concerning for most of the agencies.
Shifting staff, and it
Yes.
removed that language. Staff are not shifted.
okay, so, yeah, so thank you for that.
No problem. You're welcome.
So under these changes, so like Department of Public Safety, Correctional Services, they'll be doing their own or just a modified duties, but most of the cyber will be in do it.
I mean, their AIT departments that they currently have will act as they normally do, but do it will also have a responsibility associated with the overall cybersecurity posture of the entire state. Advising, and also, Senator Hester, if you have anything to add to, by all means, if that's all right with it.
And can we move on and come back to you so we can get some more questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On that question, did you have anything to add? Okay. Let's go back to the vice chair and then to Senator Carrozza.
Two quick things. Delegate, first off, on page 20, you referenced that the State Board of Education was taken out, and I just wanted to correct for anyone who's watching, it appears that it's State Board of Elections, not State Board of
Oh, did
Education.
I'm sorry, did I say
That's right,
education?
I just wanted to, in
Thank
case
you.
anybody,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the facts are out there. Going back to page 15 and 16, I'm interested in the Cybersecurity Coordinating Council. You removed a lot of sort of our key point people. Secretary of Budget Management, Secretary of General Services, Health, Human Services, Public Safety, Transportation, Disabilities, blah, blah, blah. I'm curious about how the decisions were made. Were there folks who didn't want to serve on that, or was that a policy decision? And second, I am curious, on page 16, lines 9 and 10, Chancellor of the University of Maryland or the Chancellor's designee, if the university system is exempted from coverage, why do they get a seat on the Coordinating Council? If you could
Sure.
just teach us that.
Sure, so I think the conversation related to them was that while they're exempted out, their one, expertise, and two, role, we're not pretending that they're not part of the executive agencies or departments, so we are including them or giving them a spot at the table to, one, benefit from the relationships they have and the expertise that they have as well. The other reason that we took a lot of these folks out, or we took out those particular positions, wasn't mainly because of this idea of the coordinating council, and the purpose is to streamline cybersecurity efforts across the executive branch and identify deficiencies. We didn't think that they would necessarily be the right folks to be at the table to have that discussion, if that answers your question.
Okay?
Okay, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise it's not about procurement. Thank you. I'm going back, and I haven't read the bill line for line, Delegate Young, and so I went back to the fiscal note, and I was trying to kind of find in the bill, so maybe you can help me. So I understand the overall purpose, which is the centralization that you talked about at the beginning of your testimony. And then the fiscal note goes on to describe, it expands the Maryland Cyber Defense Initiative, and I didn't know if there were some examples of that. And then also, it talks about the annual cybersecurity assessments, and I just wanted to know how that would work. And then my last question was the offices, the new offices that would be established.
Sure. So the one piece you mentioned about the Maryland Cyber Defense Initiative was codifying parts of the executive order. So for that, I don't have an example for you.
So when it says expand, is that,
In terms of that was by codifying the executive order, this is something that's already being done. So I don't have an example for you, but I can get that for you. I can get an answer for you related to that.
okay, I just, when it said expands the Maryland, so I just didn't know what that meant. And then I just wanted to know how the assessments would work for each, I guess, for each state agency and certain local government entities, and then where these new offices were.
Sure. Well, we established new offices under Do It, and then just want to make sure. Yeah, so, and Britt, I just wanted to clarify before I answered your question, because some of the bills we create agencies under MDEM and others in Do It, but here we're putting the agencies under Do It.
These new offices?
Yes.
Okay, and then what is your thought as the bill sponsor on how these assessments are supposed to work, these annual assessments?
Oh, so, there was no, we need to have a standard or at least a set a precedent related to how often we are evaluating cybersecurity posture of our different agencies. So how I see them working is, one, Do It with their capabilities now. They're able to do so, but now we're codifying that there's an expectation and a requirement to do them consistently, if that makes sense.
So they're actually kind of hands-on with the individual departments and agencies and kind of going through a checklist for their cybersecurity requirements?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
The other House bill, to the local bill, I should say, or the more localized bill. That's
1202.
1202. This is called Local Government Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations, and I believe you have a reprint of that also on your desk. Delegate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for sake of continuity, 1202, going through the amendments, and the same sort of way that I explained 1346 is the centralization bill. This is the establishing a relationship or the relationship between local governments and the state. We had two amendments related to the original version. Amendment number 1 adds co-sponsors from the House. And then amendment number 2 strikes language that would have created the Cyber Security Fusion Center in MDEM, strikes language creating a local cybersecurity support fund, and moved it to another bill, 1205, which is not in front of us. Clarifies procedures for local governments to report cybersecurity incidences, establishes qualifications for the Ciso, and establishes responsibilities of the Office of Security Management related to assistance for local governments. And I want to make sure I have my... And it's another way of also recognizing this is that we are clarifying the roles that folks have when an emergency happens, or how we were responding as a state to emergencies at a local level. And again, in this bill, we're also codifying other pieces of the executive order, codifying the Cyber Preparedness Unit under the Department of Emergency Management. Assisting local governments requires local governments to report cybersecurity instances to local emergency managers, which already exist under MDEM. Security Operations Center in DeWitt, and the Maryland Joint Operations Center requires units of local government and local agencies that use the state network to certify that they are in compliance with DeWitt minimum security standards. So this is what the bill does now with the amendments and with the version that passed from the House.
Okay, and committee, I would point out that in both bills, they codify the office of and the selection of the State Chief Information Security Officer, also called Ciso, and there are amendments from the House giving some very high-quality criteria
Yes.
for the selection. I know some members of the committee wanted to make clear we wanted to have a professional of the utmost competency and not a political appointee, or hopefully not a political appointee who's not competent, to be the leader of this. So that's replicated in both bills. Is that
Yes, sir.
right?
Yep, and the House committee agrees with you.
No, I'm.
Yeah.
I'm, what I've heard from the House. And I'm-
Absolutely, sir. Gotcha.
I happen to agree, but
Fair
we're on the
enough.
same page. Okay, on questions about 1202. 1202, it's the local version, it's about coordination. So probably a little less controversial than the other one.
And to be fair, 1346 was the larger of the three bills. This one and 1205 are the smaller
Right.
versions.
And I will say this, I was going to say this at the end. I know Senator Hester is working on further amendments, which may or not be ready today. If not, we'll take it up early next week to hopefully supplement and improve the bill even further.
Absolutely. And of course, understanding how the process works, expected there would be some amendments from the Senate too that we'd all discuss. So,
Yep. Vice Chair.
Technology challenges, I just want to check, I'm in 1202's file. It has DGS, the Department of General Services, is unfavorable, but when I click on it, the testimony is about House Bill 1205 and House Bill 1346. So I just want to check, does the Department of General Services, did you all submit testimony on 1202? Was it mis-uploaded by you or by the online gods, or what? You guys goofed, but you do have, you guys, okay, you goofed. Okay, I'd love to see the testimony for 1202, just so we have that prior to reading it. Is that, Mr. Chairman, I guess you don't want to,
No, we'll get it.
can we get the 60-second, like, what their concerns are about this bill, just in case Delegate Young wants to speak to them, or?
I assume they're probably the same as they are on 1346, but if you want to take 60 seconds to tell us on 1202.
Wait till you get in the microphone, just so everybody can hear. But seriously, 60 seconds, I don't want to take off the chair.
It's not even going to take 30.
All right, just make sure you're.
Good afternoon, Ellen Robertson, DGS. 1202, we have one minor concern. Language is stating that DeWitt may procure resources. We had a concern with that language. We would like that struck.
Do you happen to know where that is in the reprint, or roughly?
Page 14, lines 8 to 9. G.
Looks like page 14, lines 8 and 9. The office may procure resources, including regional coordinators, necessary to fulfill the requirements of this subtitle.
Okay.
It's a loose definition of resources, which could include things other than what is stated there.
So
Supplies, services.
your testimony would be to strike those two lines or to clarify what resources are?
To
Or either?
to strike procure resources.
Okay.
Okay, we'll look for your testimony if you could get that
This is
to us.
under the section of the Office of Security Management
I
and the
understand,
person of Ciso, not of,
but the office is under the agency.
thank you.
After Ms. Robinson? Yeah, Ms. Robinson, could you come back, please? Good. I just want to say I'm happy to meet her personally. I've dealt with her the last 2 years over the phone, email, and she has been very exceptional, outstanding. I mean, right away, good information that I could pass on that was very useful, and I just want to personally thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Okay, Delegate Young, thank you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Young, I represent 3 counties, and I'm trying to understand, and I haven't gone through the MACO testimony line by line, but I was trying to understand how this actually works for each of my individual counties. How does your bill work?
Sure, so it's honestly voluntary in this, well, so if there's an event, the normal procedure and process, if there's a cyber event, that they would be contacting MDEM, and then there wouldn't be a role for DO-IT to play, the experts associated with cybersecurity. So this bill establishes that relationship, allows for a role for them to play in the event of an emergency. And also, it codifies the office that's already being stood up under MDEM to assist local governments when there is a event, and also helps them prepare to prevent one.
So this, I saw somewhere, I forget which bill, that there was a local coordinator for the counties. Is that individual then providing technical assistance, but is there also an expectation that the counties have to meet certain requirements? Did I miss that in one of the bills? Or, because I noticed when your response to me focused on an incident or operations.
Sure.
I was trying to understand from what, if there were expectations in either bill on what a local county was required to do when it came to cybersecurity, or this is more on the coordination if there's a situation and the technical
I
assistance.
say coordination, technical assistance, and those managers, as you know, already exist, which is also why we've used MDEM within these bills, because there's a relationship that's already established that DO-IT just doesn't have with all these local.
You're talking about the regional coordinators?
Yes.
Okay,
So we were using that model that already exists, so that we're not recreating the wheel.
okay.
But assist and help with preparing local governments when they have, as you know too, your local governments have their own standards and goals they're trying to reach when it comes to cybersecurity. The idea here is for especially the preparedness unit to assist them in reaching those goals by connecting them to local as well as federal resources that they could benefit from.
And they, in their testimony, MACO said they support with amendments. Did they have amendments that you did adopt, or maybe there's been some revised language?
Sorry, is that for?
This, well, it actually
Is that from
has
the House?
all, it has all the bills on here.
Okay. My understanding from talking with MACO that we're in a good position, but I'll double check with them if there's any new amendments. But I'm under the
Okay.
impression that the ones that passed out of the House, they were.
Addressed there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Cyber, IT, and Biotech. He was appointed earlier this year, and we've worked really, really hard with 3 or 4 committee hearings and a major 50-page study with all these recommendations. And I'm going to be sad to see him go. But it's been a real delight to work with you. And as we mentioned earlier, when we drafted the bills, we put them in together, cross-filed the bills. They were drafted very rapidly, so each chamber's been working on their own amendments. I do have a question about the carve-outs for the individual agencies. And I understand that, that the policy, there's a, good policy decision made that we don't want to have, one branch of the government having too much overreach over another branch. Do you think if the committee on the House side would be amenable to, like, having a branch, like the legislative branch, certified to an independent standard and report those results to the presiding officers? And just, that wouldn't be a problem because it's not between 2 agencies. What do you think about that?
I think that it makes sense from first blush, not, and thinking about it, happy to have a conversation with you, but I think I don't think there would be a problem with that requirement to we're asking other agencies to do the same thing, so I don't think that there would be too much opposition against that. So I
And
think
the
it'd
same
be
thing
able
with
to-
USM, like if they want to be carved out, we know from the Joint Audit Committee that they've had numerous PII and other cybersecurity, repeat findings. So it means that they haven't fixed it in like 5 years. So if they were carved out, but yet expected to produce some kind of independent certification that they were meeting some standards, do you think that would be appropriate?
And I think, and I'm hoping I'm answering your question, that some of these agencies, including like the legislature, already have the capabilities of doing that, I guess, in terms of codifying, like, we would like to see it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, and I'd be open to having that discussion now, especially in the last 18 days of session and figuring out if that's, but I see where you're coming from, and I don't see it as a bridge too far, and I'm willing to bring it up to the, so,
Awesome, thank you.
you're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Okay, look, thank you for your time on a Friday afternoon. Go home, rest up, take plenty of drugs to get better.
Appreciate you bearing with me, folks.
Yeah, no, they've been bearing with me. Thank you. That concludes the hearing. We are going to spend, let me just tell you, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so, maybe 45, walking through some of this in a little more detail with committee counsel. Pat, you can stay or go home. I mean, you're excused.
Thank you.
We'll-
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
sure
Chairman.
we'll be back in touch on
Absolutely.
further amendments.
I will allow
So
the committee-
we are going to spend 40 or 45 minutes. Obviously, it's an open walkthrough, so people are welcome to stay. Then there are a few things I want to go over with the committee for about 5 minutes, and we're going to try to end up by 20 of 5, so at least people can get home and have some type of weekend. We are going to have a voting session on Monday, but it's probably going to be earlier than I announced the other day because session has moved up to 7 o'clock. So we're not going to get the voting today, and that list had some number of bills on it. I don't remember how many. And we may not get through this walkthrough. So give me a few minutes to lock that down. But with that, I'm going to go to 1346 and the committee counsel, Ms. Foxworth. There is a little summary on your desk of 10 or 12 of the key elements. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our counsel.
All right, so House Bill 1346, as explained, this is kind of the statewide policy bill. Touch on a couple of points for how the bill came to us in the Senate, and then we can kind of hone in on the bill as amended. Senator Pinsky pointed out that there is a document that tries to frame the issues a little better. So the two big picture, well, the two issues of import for us, there are some that are more relevant for B&T, but two biggest pieces that the interim committee worked through involved the authority to enforce cyber policy, so how to sort of do it with more authority, and then how to coordinate, I think the term of art is whole of government approach, so how to work with state, local, municipal levels to sort of coordinate best practices across government. So House Bill 1346 codifies and expands the Office of Security Management. If you all recall, this is in part in response to the 2019 executive order from the administration. It also codifies the Maryland Cybersecurity Coordinating Council, which also was a part of that executive order. The role of the Ciso as well is mentioned here in both House Bill 1346 and House Bill 1202 for, drafting consistency to account for the fact that if one doesn't pass, both will have that duplicate language in there. So the role of the Office of Security Management is broadly expanded to include Director of State Cyber and a Director of Local Cyber. There's a coordination, so in terms of the coordination of cybersecurity across state, local, and municipal government, the Office of Security Management is required to coordinate with the Cyber Preparedness Unit, which is in the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, which is contemplated within House Bill 1202. as the bill came to us, the Cybersecurity Coordinating Council would be exempt from the Open Meetings Act. That has been changed. The bill establishes cybersecurity coordination and operations unit. So the role of that is to coordinate cyber readiness across all government. The bill, before it was amended, and this is sort of a pretty important procurement piece. Before it was amended, procurement authority was centralized under DO-IT in terms of operations, acquiring staff, materials. All of the procurement for the states would have gone through DO-IT. That has been amended in a posture that I will explain a little later. Delegate Young explained a large part of this, but in terms of county governments at the county level, there will be yearly assessments. Office of Security Management is going to develop that criteria. Additional transfer pieces for the centralization of cybersecurity in general, that piece has also been amended through third reader process. So instead of centralizing all of cybersecurity operations, and we can walk through the text of the bill, as amended, it's only cybersecurity policy that is centralized. So sort of why the transfer of budget and staff is not included in this amended language, because the only requirement now, loosely, for states is to coordinate with the policy of the Department of Information Technology. Sort of a couple of certification requirements, requires an appropriation from the governor to cover cost of implementing the cyber plan. And there's a compliance module that Department of Information Technology has to complete by December 31st of this year. I think what makes the most sense is to start from the beginning to point out what has been changed. So the first 5 pages are technical. They are renumbering provisions. On page 7 of this amended version, originally the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Office was going to be in Maryland Department of Emergency Management. It has since been moved to DO-IT. So all of this language that strikes the office will show up later in the bill, but the language is the same. It's a complete transfer. You have a complete shift. So on page 9, you see the Office of Security Management is codified. It's expanded to add the state and local coordination role.
If reprints if they want them.
Sure, I think I have a
Do you
few.
folks have reprints in the audience, or do you want them? They're good,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Okay, continue, sorry.
So,
I was just curious, do you want to pause and take questions, or should we save our
think that's a good
questions,
idea.
or how do you want to do, what's the process?
Let's fold the page. I'm afraid we won't get, well,
Oh, okay. Which page were you on where you just mentioned that it had been struck and moved from
think
MDM to
7.
DO-IT?
7.
Page 7,
7
okay.
through top of 9.
Thank you very much.
So this also changes the Office of Security Management. Office of Security Management will be led by the state Chief Information Security Officer. Later on in the bill, we'll see how the amendments in the House added some specific qualifications for them. But this is also an expansion from the executive order because the executive order mainly dealt with or required the office to compile data, inventory, et cetera. So this is giving it more responsibilities over, as I mentioned, local and state cyber readiness and preparedness. On page 10, there are additional professional qualifications for the appointment of the Ciso, which were not originally mentioned in the executive order and, of course, have not been codified yet. Page 11, it's clear that the Director of Local Cyber and the Director of State Cyber are now contemplated within the office and within the role of DO-IT generally. And so as assume the Director of Local Cybersecurity helps with cyber preparation at the local level. And the Director of State Cyber coordinates across state agencies for cyber at the state level. The state cybersecurity director conducts technical assistance, helps with coordinating resources and cyber preparedness. Under 3.5-2A-04, which also is a renumbering of the entire state finance and procurement article to accommodate these changes, there's a coordination role between the Office of Security Management and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, which was one of those recommendations from the interim work group and conforms to that whole of government approach. So additional responsibilities of the office, there's subsection B. This comes exactly from the executive order. This is their role in terms of data. They'll have this data, they'll aggregate it, they'll examine it based off of a report that the executive branch agency submit to them. So as expected, they have the capabilities, the state agencies, Department of Labor, Department of Environment, et cetera, to hold that data, to have insight in their information technology systems. So they'll be reporting this information to the Office of Security Management. Office of Security Management is going to categorize this to make sure that it is in tandem with the best cybersecurity policy of the state, which is a distinction key in these amendments because, again, responsibility for policy and not control over the data that they have. Page 13 is just additional roles of the office. It notes that office will be responsible for coordinating with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, as mentioned earlier, and this is the Cyber Security Preparedness Unit that we will go a little deeper in with House Bill 1202. This language on page 14 is also similar, so in terms of conducting regional exercises under sub point 1 and sub point 2, establishing regional assistance groups also refers to the Cyber Preparedness Unit. So on page 15, jumping ahead just a little bit, the Maryland Cybersecurity Coordinating Council is codified. There are modifications that were made to the membership, as you can see, instead of 7 secretaries of various agencies, it's been moved to, I think, 10 under principal designated units under state government. So the meetings of the council are no longer exempt from the Open Meetings Act, and that is because under the Open Meetings Act, generally, there is an exemption that an entity, a public body, can go into closed session if cybersecurity is discussed. So they'll be able to close it regardless. Jumping a little bit to page 17, this establishes a cyber coordination and operations unit. And this is the one that we moved from MDEM and put it under the Department of Information Technology. This unit also has a coordination role with Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and that's to conduct regional exercises and to provide local training that conforms to federal standards. Also is a reporting requirement within that unit that is now within Department of Information Technology. I will move a little faster. 3.5-302 exempts 6 additional departments and entities from oversight from Department of Information Technology in general. Page 21 deals with procurement, and so under line 7 of 21, this is kind of the focus of the bill as I understand it. It makes clear that it expands the duties of the secretary to centralize information technology policy instead of information technology in general. Procurement provisions on lines 22 to 26 make clear that the procurement policy has been amended to allow states to procure their own resources instead of placing that within the purview of DO-IT.
Yeah, I don't want to skip over that too quickly. That's very important. That's page 21, lines 22 to 26. It puts explicitly that in terms of IT generically, that stays under the department, it's not shifted to do it. So I don't want to jump over that too quickly. Okay, keep going.
The initial consultation requirement would have required the secretary to consult with the Attorney General, and that's been shifted to the Maryland Cybersecurity Coordinating Council that we are codifying. There is appropriation-related language that the governor has to abide by. The governor also has to submit a budgetary report that gives the General Assembly insight into cybersecurity fiscal allocations. Page 24, most of it is technical. However, key point, lines 16 through 28, said this is requiring state procurement, again, to be consistent with do-it policy, so it's making explicit through this portion of the code as well, that the states will be able to maintain their own procurement so long as it's in alignment with the policy oversight of do-it. 25 through 31, good news, all of this is technical. So it's striking the language that would have been shifted when procurement was placed under the Department of Information Technology for all state governments. But since essentially procurement is in the same posture that it was prior to this bill, nothing is changing. For locals, instead of overseeing the procurement, the department will be able to assist with procurement. The role of the department has also been expanded to touch on contracts. So third-party contracts and the contracts that state units enter into will also have to be conform to the Department of Information Technology. And so they'll develop basic security requirements that are in alignment with federal standards for those contracts as well. We are almost done on this one. There's a certification requirement that kind of jumped into this bill from last year. There was an issue with sort of reaching into the legislature and the judiciary with minimum security standards. So under the bill before it was amended, legislature and the judiciary would have had to certify minimum security standards, that their systems comported with the standards of not the judiciary, of do-it within the executive branch. Now that is no longer the case. As you'll see in HB 1346, there is not any certification at all. However, in HB 1202, there is the requirement that the local governments certify their standards. But on the state level, legislature and judiciary do not have to certify minimum standards. Yearly reporting requirement that executive agencies have to complete. This is on data and IT systems, and this goes back to what we saw earlier, probably page 7 or so. The Office of Security Management takes this data, compiles it, aggregates it. This is a report. This is where they get that data from. So every year, each executive branch has to give that information that they hold on. So some language, permanent and transient vendor interconnections, cloud or statistical analysis system solutions, unit employees, information technology staff positions, non-information technology staff positions, budget that relates to information technology. So county governments, not including municipal governments, each year are responsible for completing a cybersecurity preparedness and response plan and completing assessments on cybersecurity. And they will report those results to the Office of Security Management. And in doing these response plans and preparedness assessments, they're going to work with the local emergency managers, which are in place at the local level. So there's language on page 39. There's subsection C that establishes a mechanism for a local government to report a cybersecurity attack. So they're going to report it to the local emergency manager, Security Operations Center, and the Maryland Joint Operations Center. All of these entities, minus the emergency manager, are within the Department of Emergency Management. It's language on page 40 under 12107, which would have modified procurement that is stricken because the case is procurement posture stays with states. It's a compliance module that's required. And then on page 40 and 41, the transfer, as Delegate Young mentioned earlier, of states, budgets, staff rather, budgets, all IT items has been removed because the states will be able to retain that. That's HB 1346.
Okay, the vice chair asked what the process is going to be. I was hoping we take questions on this, so we get clear in case people want to add amendments, as I mentioned before. Senator Hester, our Senator Hester, who was a Senate cross-file, and we decided to wait for the House to act because we didn't want to spend a lot of time turning our wheels and not getting anywhere. I'm not sure they're ready. We'll probably spend time on her amendments early next week. So I would take questions on 1346, and then if we have time, the other one's less controversial, and it's not a lot of new stuff. Then we'll have her go through that and take questions, and then I have a few announcements, then we'll adjourn. Okay. I think a while ago, I had Senator Hester started to ask about questions. I don't know if you had one yourself, or I should go to somebody else.
I do have some, but I can give
your
everybody
call.
else a chance first, it's fine.
Okay. Senator.
Thank you, and my questions are, it seems like obviously a major reorganization, so I'm really trying to understand it. Since this centralization is all being put on the Department of Information Technology, would I be able to ask them some questions on how this is actually going to be implemented? I know the Senate sponsor has had a lot of conversations with the.
I think that's fair, as much as we can. I
Okay.
mean, I think a lot of the bill, and I don't want to speak for either the House sponsor or the Senate sponsor, the bill shifted from its initial posture. There's more coordination and more top-down, we're going to beat you upside of the head. I think it's a little more nuanced now, with some very explicit things, from my reading of it as a layperson. But if you've got some questions, we can have DeWitt come up, Patrick Mulford from DeWitt, and Senator Hester, you can supplement the answers as well. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I'm kind of an organizational person, try to see the chart, how this is actually going to work. So I understand the value of the centralization.
Yes.
Since the Department of Information Technology becomes now the focus, the central coordinator. I'd like to understand what that means for DeWitt. And I'd also, because there's been earlier conversations about this procurement piece, I'd like to better understand how that piece would work, how it's working now, how it would work. So big picture, and then maybe narrow in on that issue.
Can I start with the procurement piece, if you don't mind? Sorry, Patrick Mulford, External Affairs Director at DeWitt. We actually, at DeWitt, are completely in line with DGS's opinion with keeping procurement at DGS. We have, in the last year and over the last 5 years, come a long way with working with DGS to try to speed up processes and really to streamline processes to work with other agencies. So that kind of.
So are you saying it's working, so don't move it to
Yes.
us? I mean, are you saying you don't want it? I mean, this
No.
is.
At this point, we are very comfortable with the primary procurement being at DGS for DeWitt.
It's a policy question. That's
Yes.
Right,
up
no,
to the
I just wanted to
legislature.
understand how it would
They will enforce and take whatever responsibility we give, and if it's the right policy, they'll do it.
Yes,
If it's the
sure.
wrong policy, but it's a policy decision of this committee and this legislature. So I don't want to put him too much
Sorry,
on the
yeah.
spot of saying, I don't know if they testified or not. But I think the question was more how they'll do it, rather than whether they are looking forward to it or
Right.
issuing that responsibility.
It would, in answering that question, it would revert back to how things were run 5 years ago, before we made the procurement all centralized under DGS. So it would just basically, I believe it would revert back to that. Now, I'm not a procurement specialist, so I can't tell you piece by piece how that worked. I was also not at Do It 5 years ago, so I would be happy to have our procurement people, our chief of staff, who was our chief financial officer, sit down and talk to you about that. But I think actually the people at DGS would probably be the best people to talk to about that.
No, and I was kind of trying to understand, obviously, because of the reforms 5 years ago.
Sure.
Everything got centralized for procurement,
Yes.
not cybersecurity. What I'm hearing now, where we are with this bill, is we're centralizing everything with cybersecurity in Do It, but the procurement piece, because it seems to be working, at least your position, DGS position, the administration's position is that this is working, why don't you keep the procurement piece? I just want,
Yes.
is it because it's an expertise that they have and you don't have?
Well, they have the expertise in procurement, we have the expertise in IT and cybersecurity, and we're now working together hand in hand, and it's actually, it's working well. It can work better. Obviously, there's some things we can fix, but we are on the path to it being fixed.
Okay, and what are your challenges going to be with everything being centralized?
Now, it's more centralizing policy. Before the amendments, it was centralizing all staff and resources and all of that. From what I know from these amendments, it's now centralizing policy, and giving a little bit more authority to the Ciso to be able to enforce that policy. It only adds, I don't want to say only, but it adds a few more positions, but at the higher levels. We are not taking any of their IT staff, and I don't believe we are transferring any cybersecurity staff as well. So it's more of a policy centralization under Do It and putting that into the code.
Which would not present the same challenges if it was everything else?
Exactly.
Okay.
From my reading of the amendments, that's
Okay.
what I'm seeing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mulford, thank you for being here.
Sure.
I was just curious, I heard a comment somewhere along the line that this was like a major reorganization. My understanding is that we're basically codifying mostly current practice between the office at Do It and the unit at MDEM, and adding some more resources to both. So could you talk us through what actually exists now and whether you see this as a massive reorg?
I don't, other than the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Office, which I think, in our opinion, is duplicative of the Cyber Preparedness Unit, which is in 1202, excuse me. Other than that, I believe it's along the same lines of what we do now when there is an incident. Normally MDEM is told from the county that there's an incident, and if there's an incident in a county, they're told, and then they tell Chip Stewart, the Ciso, or send it to the cybersecurity, our unit. I'm forgetting the office that it is right now. Blanking on it, but they let the Ciso know that something's going on, and then we work in collaboration with each other to fix the problem. And then bring in, if any other agencies need to be brought in, whether it's state police, any federal agencies, we bring them in as well. So we would be working hand in hand the same way that this bill would have us doing, other than the only big addition, which I do not think is necessary, is the Cybersecurity Coordination and Operations Office, because I think it's duplicative of the CPU, the Cybersecurity Preparedness Unit, that is already in MDEM, which is currently already acting.
Just to follow up, this is one of the few things that I see as it's either a drafting error or a policy decision. My intent when I put in the bill request was to reinforce the unit that exists at MDEM. They've currently got 2 staff, which are grant funded. So it's to fully fund the existing unit in MDEM. And then to add on to the existing office and Do It, a director of state security and a director of local security. So now that there's this, in this bill as drafted, there's what Mr. Mulford just said, a duplication of the MDEM office. And I honestly can't tell whether it's a drafting error or it's a policy decision. So we need to figure out what it is and then make a decision.
If we can, let's go, oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure you saw my light.
No, my head did not turn
Nope.
that far.
All right.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few things. Patrick, Mr. Mulford, sorry. You and Senator Hester both were just talking a lot about how MDEM, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, is very involved in, has a this and has a that, and yet they've been removed from the coordinating council. So I was surprised and concerned about that, and I have already notified council that
they
I
have
would like
not
an
been.
amendment to put them back.
They have not been.
Show me.
The language, the secretary of each of the principal departments, they are a principal department now, I believe.
They ought to be. So I was on page 15 earlier.
Yep, and
And they were removed.
No, but there's a site of section 8 something.
So that's what we were gonna, that's what I.
on
checked
22
this
through 24, on page 15,
And that includes everybody?
I believe so, yes.
So that's the challenge when there's sites to 8-201.
Yeah.
Okay, because lines 28, 29, Secretary of MDEM is removed. So, okay, so I'll
Yeah, no,
get
it,
clarification on that.
No, actually, I have the list in front of me. It includes emergency management and IT.
Okay, okay, thank you. My other question is about transparency. And I've sponsored, this body has passed a lot of legislation on transparency, and I think making them subject, this new coordinating council, subject to open meetings law, but the ability to close and go into executive session, I think that's the right balance. That's fine. What I'm interested in, and I'm looking on pages 38, 39, and 40, if you've got it in front of you. It's about, so first off, it's like, when do we share this information and with whom is just the global question, I guess, that I've got. So starting on page 38, lines 11 through 17. You know, sort of, when should it be reported? I mean, I think, first off, on line 14, I think the word when should be whether, because I think that's actually a question as well. So it's whether to report, the manner in which to report, and then time period is when. And so I'm going to suggest that, hold just a sec, you're about to answer, but give me one more second. And then on page 39, lines 26, 27, 26 and going down, actually the rest of the page and top of 41, the criteria for determining, and again, I'm going to suggest that when becomes whether an incident must be reported, the manner in which to report, the time period, which is when to report, and then the MJOC on lines 31, 32, the Maryland Joint Operations Center shall immediately notify. And so I'm wondering, first off, on the one hand, it's like, well, we're not sure whether we're going to tell anyone and how quickly. Then we say that the MJOC is going to tell everybody right away. And then the follow-up question and the global question also is, when should the press and the public be informed? Because presumably if we're under, if there's a hack, if there's an attack, if there's a something, we don't want to alarm people.
Right.
But at some point, the public deserves to know, the press deserves to have the information. And so I know that's sort of a lot of global questions here.
I'll start with your last question. I believe that has to be on a case-by-case basis. Each incident is going to be wildly different than another. And if we try to put that into statute, I believe we could get into a lot of trouble. You know, and I'll just leave it at that. I believe it's on a case-by-case basis that needs to be, that you need to have faith in the public officials who are kind of leading the charge on each incident, and that they will be able to let the public know when it is best for the public and for the institution, so that it doesn't get into any more trouble, for lack of a better term. But I'll just leave it at, I believe it needs to be on a case-by-case basis, because each incident will be wildly different than another.
So if we can stay on this, and then we'll go back to my other question, if it's okay, Mr. Chair. When, I'll put on my 911 hat, since I've done that. If a 911 center goes down, the public needs to know, don't dial 911 if
Right.
your house is literally on fire because it's been hacked.
Sure.
So here's the non-emergency number, or you can text, or you can do these other ways of getting support, getting emergency assistance. I wonder whether there needs to be some reference, some language about public disclosure. And even if it offers flexibility, I think that operating 100% of the time in the dark is not in the public interest
Okay.
on these. So if we can shift to the other.
Fair
That's a
comment.
policy question.
That's a
Yes.
policy question. Yeah, no, I stated it as, as a statement, that, the end part.
Sure.
Could you shift to the other part about the other sections?
Yes, about so I believe they leave it up to the State Chief Information Security Officer to determine the when, the how, of reporting incidents to that office.
So it's a little bit conflicting, because the Ciso here on page 39, the State Chief Information Security Officer shall, and then it's when and how and all that, and in my opinion, whether an incident should be reported. But then under that, the MJOC, the Joint Operations Center, which is in MDEM, the Department
Right.
of Emergency Management, shall immediately. So the Ciso has now lost the ability to have any weighing in, and I just wonder if that's your,
Well,
that's the
above
intent.
that, each local government shall report a cybersecurity incident to, and then they report it to the
To the MJOC,
the
then-
appropriate local manager,
right?
the Security Operations Center, which is under Do It and under the CISO.
And then there's some flexibility here on lines 23 through 30, but then that seems to be contradicted a bit on lines 31, 32, and the top of page 40. We can follow up, I mean, we're
Yeah,
not voting on it now, but it seems to be
I
a bit
would see them,
contradictory.
I don't know if I see them as contradictory or complementary, because it's just making sure that this is making sure, and I believe this is what this language intended, I'm just reading it and giving you my thoughts, is that they are making sure that if the MJOC gets information, it goes directly to the subject matter experts at Do It. I believe that's what they were trying to do here.
Okay. Let's follow up, and let's have legal counsel and Senator Hester and others just take a look at that, because intent needs to
Sure.
be really precise in our language.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mulford. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's going to complete it for 1346. I don't think we're going to start 1202, although I don't think it would take very long. Let me bring this to a close and talk about a few things. Thank you, Mr. Mulford. Early next week, I'm sorry, Senator.
Say one quick thing before we leave this bill?
Sure.
So I just wanted to flag for the committee that I think that the House has done an amazing job on this part of the bill. Over the course of the past month, I have been in conversations with many of the agencies who've, like they contacted Delegate Young, they also contacted me. So I've been compiling amendments to this bill, thinking that we would then conform the Senate version and pass them both out. I wanted to flag for the committee that some of the policy choices I will be offering amendments on this bill include, I believe that that extra office, which I feel is duplicative. As the House struck the uncodified language at the end that would transition the staff, I have a transition plan that is more aggressive than their centralizing only the policy. I believe this bill needs to have some teeth. And so the amendments that I'll share on Monday include a 2 or 3 year transition plan that I just wanted to put on the table for consideration. It basically has a trigger such that if these assessments aren't approved and aren't done in a timely manner, then that transition could start after 18 months. So just wanted to flag that. The third thing is the qualifications that has just been offered for the CISO. I think it's really important that we hire good people. We also are kind of moving towards, there was just this big announcement about 4-year degrees, so we could put in a word "or" there that would say, the degree or the certifications that are required. I think it's a really good add-on, but I just want to flag that. I think that on the procurement, I don't think this bill fundamentally is about procurement. I think that we shouldn't get too hung up on that in this bill. I think we should leave it to budget and tax. And I think that's about it, but I would also like to make myself available to this committee if anybody wants to talk over the weekend, just to reach out to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on Monday at 5 o'clock promptly, and I mean promptly. We have to go in at 7. I would like to do it earlier, but I'm not sure we can. There are some other meetings in the way. So we'll have 2 hours of voting, and I haven't figured out the order of the voting versus the walkthrough of 1202 and hearing the good senator's amendments. I hope to accomplish both. I'm not sure we will. We'll be voting on Tuesday as well after hearings. And you might want to start preparing amendments because we are going to we're going to rock and roll into the cyber. We're not going to tarry. I want to move it and get it on the floor because it's got to go back to the House. So between Monday and Tuesday, I'd like to move those 8 bills on the list and if we can on the cyber. And then we'll start working on other bills. So that's the plan for next week, 5 to 7 on Monday, and then after hearings on Tuesday, it might be a little bit of a late night. Okay, on a separate matter, at around 11 o'clock today, 11:15 today, a third party, not to be named, forwarded a copy of some amendments that were going to be offered about 95 minutes later in the House of Delegates on the climate bill. I have to tell you, I was a little disappointed that the House did not send me the proposed amendments so we could do some back and forth and try to get there quickly instead of going to a conference committee. They have spent this afternoon in ENT and ECM amending the bill, and I've seen some of them, and some of them are okay, to be frank with you. And between 1 and 2:30, there was a little bit of shuttle diplomacy with the Senate President's staff, myself, and the Speaker's staff to see if we can settle some more issues later today or on Monday when it's on second reader. We're getting closer. There's still a few outstanding issues from my point of view. And I would like to avoid a conference committee. It's a Senate bill in the House, so they can amend it on third reader. So we have a few days to do that, but the day for presentment will be quickly approaching. So there's progress, but there have been some ups and downs. Again, I was disappointed. I thought we'd have it. I've been asking for an informal conversation for the last 5 days to start talking about gives and takes. And at around 2 o'clock, there were some movement of some compromises, which I'll have to bring back to you. I don't want to interfere with the House business at the moment. But we're not there yet, nor have there been a formal direct conversation between the chair of the appropriate committee over there and the Senate President's office and the Speaker's office, which I'd hope we would have. So, again, a number of their amendments I can live with and are fine, but we're not there yet. So that's what I can tell you. You can watch, I don't know if are they still meeting?
ECM is still meeting.
The Environmental and Transportation, they did amendments from like 1 to 3 or 3:30, and then it went over to the Economic Matters. I still have not seen a new reprint of the amendments. So I've sort of been the last to be informed here, although once we got a copy of it, Mr. Seidman and I have been talking and trying to come up with some compromise, and he's been doing a little shuttle diplomacy. So I want to get there, and I don't want to have a replay of last year and start pointing fingers. It's still within reach, but we've had a few slowdowns. So that's where we are on that. And as soon as I know more and hopefully get a reprint from the House, we can share that. So I just wanted to keep you abreast. That's been happening this afternoon. So that's what we have. It's Friday, 4:31. Get some rest. And Senator Ellis, I hope the wearing of masks is not coming back into style. And I assume you're not feeling that great. And I hope it wasn't because of me. And it's who? Him? Which him? Huh? And I know Senator Simon Ayer he's been listening from his office. He's feeling a little rough at the same time. So everyone take plenty of vitamin C, get some rest, and we'll see you Monday, if not before, 5 o'clock sharp here. Thank you for your work this week. And I want to thank